Yes, so like just to ask about the question about Sotapanna, because people obviously want to practice and find a teacher with a right view. That's probably criterium for practice, and how they can judge who to follow, who to listen.
You have to realize that you don't have the criteria for what right is. So you don't have a criteria for what teacher knows what they talk about and which one of them doesn't. You don't. The only criteria a person has is this is agreeable and this is disagreeable. That's not necessarily always corresponding to this is right and this is wrong. Sometimes disagreeable things are right. Sometimes agreeable things are wrong. Sometimes agreeable things are right, depending on what you find agreeable or disagreeable.
And you kind of, usually it's going to be this person is acting in a way that fits with my image of what I think.
Extent, yeah.
So
you question your image.
I don't know what a Sotapanna is.
Yeah. It has. You're gonna have some notion. So some ajahn will be more inspiring to you than the other, and that's fine. There has to be a starting point, but you don't want to stop there and now just blindly defend that ajahn and not listen to any other one. You want to see, why is this more inspiring to me? So you want to start, as I always say, with something that is least likely to be wrong, which is the suttas themselves, but that doesn't mean they read plainly, clearly. Everybody's basically responsible for their own interpretation of most of the suttas, because they've been, it's been so long time ago, and they're so general and so condensed in meaning that same passage can mean one thing and completely opposite thing for somebody else. So you want to be honest with yourself. Am I free from suffering? No, means I don't have the right criteria, means I better be careful when I choose to follow agreeable, and I better be careful when I choose to dismiss the disagreeable.
So having just suttas available and not a teacher, is still some hope for attaining the right view?
Well, yes, but there is a big gap between the suttas and when people approach it. They usually, on practical level, there has to be something in between, at least to direct you towards the suttas, how to read them rightly and regard them rightly. Yeah, that's what we spoke in one of the previous talks, exactly.
So even those who said, they practicing alone and the suttas, they also had Nilavira as a starting point, like the right beginning. And if they don't find any teacher, ajahns who are Aryas, looking for Putuja.
See, that's it. If they don't find, they won't find it. The only time they realize they found it is when they become Aryas themselves, in which case they won't need it. So you can't be sure, unless you're Sotapanna, that your teacher is Sotapanna. But then, if you're Sotapanna, then you will know. Because you wouldn't have been a Sotapanna. So it's not a question of finding the right teacher. That's the point. Until they find the right teacher, they'll never find the right teacher if they're looking for the right teacher. You need to find the right view on account of the teacher. And then you know that you found the right teacher when you stop needing it.
And what can a Putujana teacher can do for?
Nothing. Can inspire people in virtue. But it's highly unlikely they would be inspiring somebody in virtue without inspiring them in the further wrong view. But it's possible. If a Putujana is honest, transparent, and says, I don't know the way of suffering, but the way I understood the suttas is that sense restraint is really necessary and really important, and even if you don't get anywhere, as the Buddha said, if you spend the rest of the days of your life in tears of pains of sense restraint, it's still better, and you're heading for heavens and so on.
The problem is, once you get to the stage of being a teacher, you are now in contact with praise, honour, gains, and that's going to corrupt you. Unless you kind of
if there's no right view,
that's going to corrupt you.
Well, I mean, you already corrupted yourself even before that. You were teaching freedom from suffering while knowing you don't know the freedom from suffering. So even before praise and blame, you were already corrupted. That's what I mean, like I said that in previous talk, even if you kind of inadvertently, I found this helpful, but you're presenting it as Dhamma, but you don't know whether that's Dhamma or not. That's a very unwholesome thing to do. Because you can't accidentally be right You cannot accidentally stumble upon Nibbana and then become enlightened. So the corruption started by giving in to the established norms of whatever teacher today is, knowing or not knowing or ignoring the fact that you do not well suffering yourself. It's a plainest contradiction in terms there can be. You don't know the escape, and here you are preaching the escape.
Some teachers will probably think they know the way of suffering they are.
I'm sure some would kind of think they know, but many times I heard like senior monks say, I'm not a Sotapanna, but then spend an hour giving you a Dhamma talk telling you how to practice Dhamma.
Not just I'm not, it's like, who is? Nobody
Oh
is.
yeah. Oh, there's nothing to attain, there's nothing, the more you practice, the less you know. And things like that. And then go on and teach practice.
You also kind of self-declared Sotapanna also around.
Yeah. That's irrelevant. Whether you declare or not or whatever, it's irrelevant.
Probably it's not our place to judge that, but probably just listen what they have to say and then...
Depends. It is your place to judge that for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's not your place to judge that for everybody else in the world, but you had to judge for yourself. And then you have to judge what you just judged for yourself, and not take that for granted either. And then see why you judged it in a certain manner and not in the other one. That's how you will become transparent.
I'm just thinking there's so few places in the world when one can ordain and practice,
Mm-hmm.
and so many choices, and then so basically you go to any monastery where you can get training Vinaya, and then you have to just be quite independent in some way, but there's also can have a disadvantage of too independence, you become arrogant.
Well, monastery doesn't make you practice. Non-monastery doesn't make you non-practice. You yourself do so. So, if you're looking for a place so you can practice, means you're looking for practice at the wrong place.
That's a title.
No, well, that's why we said that before. You want to recognize it. You're fully responsible for practicing or non-practicing. So if you're not in the monastery, you're fully responsible for restraint or non-restraint. It does not mean because I'm not in the monastery, I don't need to be restrained. Or because if I get into monastery, I will automatically be restrained. And if you start thinking like that, then it really, certainly in the beginning, won't matter as much where you are, in a sense of, like, I really need this environment and there is no practice without it. It will only matter in that indirect sense whereby, are you constantly bombarded with things you have to say no to and restrain and endure, or are you not? And you can actually find certain, quite a lot of ways of living, even without being in a monastery. They would be quite secluded and non-distracting, and not really demanding too much of your effort in just enduring the world. But you need to take responsibility for your restraint or for your lack of it, and then you will start going in the right direction.
I can even see the practice like how people, monks, practicing certain place, or that was a very good place to improve my practice.
And they change the place, the practice is gone.
Exactly.
Or even worse, they leave the monastery still as a monk and they disrobe.
Yes.
Like even the rules have not been kept internally. It was all done by the circumstances and just following what others do and say. The moment you step out of that bubble, you're done. There is no other criteria or reference point making you independent.
Surrender to the form, as I was told once.
Surrender to the form.
Surrender to the form, the kind of structures of the monastery. Surrender to all that.
Just do it. Stop thinking about it.
Just exactly.
That's a good advice.
Don't take responsibility. Let the monastery be your responsibility.
Which is not quite what the Buddha meant
It's not,
when
is
he
it?
said, "Be an island for yourself."
Yeah.
Yeah.
and even critical monks wanting seclusion, and you should surrender to pujas and gathering.
Well, people have the reasons.
Because once you find that right place, the right place of practice, then it reveals how ridiculous or how unnecessary the external circumstances are really.
I mean, genuine right place.
Yeah, when you find a
internally.
real right
Yeah,
place of practice,
absolutely.
internal place,
And I was talking about the real
The-
home.
the real home.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 It's what you were saying before. It's the what's important, what's wholesome and unwholesome has nothing to do with the things out there. It's nothing to do
Yeah,
with
the
the
things that
physical
it had
place that
something
you're
to
in.
do with are the things you abandon by keeping the precepts.
yeah.
Now it's on to you to develop the principle within that.
Uh-huh.
But yes, literally, like again, just think about it. If your practice depends on a place, do you have a say over places? Do you have a say over duration? Do you have a say over the environment not changing? Even if you do, will you have that say forever? No. Which means sooner or later that has to go. Which means then your practice will have to go with it. I always say, like, no, imagine like today you'll end up in a hospital. By the end of the day you have to be hospitalized for something. How would your mind remain equanimous, indifferent in the same sense it is on top of a mountain? Because it should be, if you've been practicing rightly. Bombarded by elements, enduring the words and company and discomfort, it still should not make any difference, because that's not where the difference is. But if the thought of it already freaks you out, means, well, there you go, loads of work for you to do, and that's exactly what needs to be dealt with. But even so, that's what I mean. Like, even when people go in the forest and seclusion, they do it out of that projected external reason, which is just because it pleases them, makes things easier at the time, so you don't have to deal with anything else. And look, all the suttas talk about seclusion. Yeah, once you have the right view, sure, you'll know exactly where the place of that seclusion is. But even that, it's a relative thing. Seclusion. Like, some people can live on top of a mountain and still live in company.
Yeah.
Some people can live surrounded by people but be completely secluded. Because the company, again, is internal basis for desire for distraction or non-distraction.
That viveka is not just
Physically
not
boarding
physical,
yourself
exactly.
in a stone cell, padded stone cell, where you won't be able to hear, see or nothing of the external world.
You can also say that place of practice is incomparable to any other, to a physical place.
Because it's not a place,
incomparable.
exactly. It's not a physical place.
So it overrides all
Mm-hmm.
physical, beautiful places in the world that you could ever imagine.
Yeah.
Ever some, secluded mountain stream with the deers.
Well, that was the suttas as well. When the Buddha, what was that? Oh yeah, when the man saw the bed by the road, like a bed of leaves and twigs, he says, "Oh, whoever slept here last night must have had a rough night."
Oh yeah.
And the Buddha said, "No, among those who sleep well, I'm the foremost who sleeps well." And the man didn't understand, and he says, "Imagine you're a king with, like, I don't know, 15 wives that attend to your every need, and like the high luxurious bed and food, everything you can possibly imagine in terms of the place, comfort, sense, desire. But say, would it on some occasion be like that king? Wouldn't his mind be gripped by something unpleasant on account of somebody said something or somebody didn't do something, so that fever, he could not sleep at night? No amount of wives could attend to him for that. He would be gripped by that ill will or lust or pain." He says, yes, that's possible. And he said, but what about those who are incapable of experiencing that kind of internal pain, grief, fever, craving? Can they then be disturbed by anything? So no, because that's actually the root of the disturbance, not where you sleep or how you sleep, or what elements you endure or what elements you don't endure.
So circumstances become irrelevant, or become equal
Well, you
places.
exactly, you went beyond them. That's why, like, the whole, was it Sabasa Sutta, the whole set of kilesas to be abandoned simply by enduring them. Heat, cold, words of others, discomfort. Just have to endure it. That's how you become strong, that's how you abandon it. And same, like when a person's mind gets touched by the pleasant feeling, the body gets touched by the pleasant feeling, as in the possibility for pleasure arises, they cannot resist it. They cannot help but crave towards it. When they are touched by the unpleasant feeling, again, they could just bear it. There's always an option, but they can't. They can't help crave against it. And that's why they suffer, not because they're touched in the first place, but because they can't help either crave for more or for less of it. So that's how deeply circumstances are irrelevant in that sense. Even your craving is not in circumstances.
Yeah.
Even that, the agreeable and disagreeable is not. It's in the circumstances, it's not the root for lust and aversion. It's your own ignorance of agreeable and disagreeable. But that can only become apparent on the basis of sense restraint and the precepts. So one criteria that Puthujjana can use for finding the right teacher or the teaching is, why do I want to practice Dhamma in the first place? Be very, very clear what you want, and then you will become clearer as to what you need. You don't know what you need because you don't know what you really want.
I think most of us people start practicing for the wrong reason. Maybe just because inspiring.
Well, not being clear about your
lifestyle.
reasons is a wrong reason in itself.
Yeah.
So why do you want to practice the Dhamma? Oh, because I want to be free from suffering. So then I'll seek for the teachings that talk about freedom from suffering. Not talk about some random anecdotal stories and something that will entertain me and help me fall asleep. You can question it even further. So, I value freedom from suffering while I'm not being free from suffering. If I were to think about it, how would that freedom from suffering be developed? Through suffering or through extreme pleasure? Which is more likely? You already get the answer. Things that are valuable to be, obtained in the world, do you have to work for them? Or you just get them through pure pleasure? Which is more often? Which is more common? So now you know, okay, so I should then seek for that, for the teachings that tell me, talk about freedom from suffering, and also make me feel unpleasant. So you can, even with an ignorant Puthujjana's mind, you can still develop kind of accurate criteria if you're willing to accept the discomfort of it.